If you're not doing this, your stuff will forever sound amateur. What's up, you guys? Nathan Larsen here with another video for those of you who make music at home. Whether you're a songwriter, a producer, or an artist, if you're writing and recording your own music, this is the channel for you. First off, what do you guys think of the new tagline, Make Music at Home? I'm curious to see what you think. First video, trying it out. Leave me a comment if you like it. We'll make shirts, we'll make hats, we'll make all the merch. I don't know. Who knows what'll happen? This might not even fit. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But in this video, we're talking about the 5 biggest and most common mistakes I see home studio producers, home studio artists making all the time. Let's do it. But first things first, if you like the video, smash the like button. I don't know why I say smash the like button. Actually, I do. It's peer pressure because everyone else does it. Okay. Anyway, you should also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. We're going to have a lot more videos coming out here in the very near future that are just going to blow your face off. Man, I think I've had way too much coffee today. Make sure you stick around to the end because the last one here, if you're not doing this, your stuff will forever sound amateur. So mistake number 1 is kind of 2 parts. It's either recording your material too loud or too soft. Now, what I'm talking about is anything that you're recording with a microphone. This could be a vocal, a guitar, drums, it doesn't matter what it is. So often what ends up happening is that when the signal is coming into your DAW, it's coming in way too hot. Clipping, distorting, those are completely irreparable. You cannot work with that. And don't say we can fix it in the mix because you cannot fix clipping in the mix. It's not repairable. So the target for recording when it comes into your DAW is to have your gain set so that on the meter, it's coming in peaking at about -6 dB. Peaking at that level. So in other words, that's where it is at the loudest moment. So if you're recording a vocal, for example, you want to make it so that the loudest part, that's where you're peaking at. So what I want to do is quickly just jump into the DAW and show you some examples of the wrong way, and then we'll talk about some examples the right way. So the first one is too loud, but then we're also going to talk a little bit about tracking in things too quiet, because that is almost as much of a problem. It's not quite as bad, but we'll talk about that here in a second. Let's jump into the DAW first. All right, guys, so we are in my DAW, and what we're gonna do is basically show you 3 examples here. I have a version that is too hot, too soft, and then perfect. And what you're gonna be seeing here is in the metering, which is down here, you can see, like, for example, my voice here, we're peaking at, 4.8. You're going to be seeing here this one that's too hot. It technically is not clipping, I don't believe. I think there's maybe a little bit of clipping here. You can see the waveform. There's a little bit of clipping maybe there, but nothing else in here is like really clipping. But you're going to notice once we listen to it, this has no effects on it. And the thing is that this is where, just kind of a side note, it's a really good idea to record your stuff with no compression, no EQ, no reverb, and get it sounding really good with none of that. Because then once you start adding the compression, the reverb, the delay, the EQ, all that other stuff, it's gonna sound that much better. So let's go ahead and just do this. We're gonna listen to this. This is one of my originals. It's a single that I'll be releasing here down the road. It's a duet, so this is just the chorus. So this is Too Hot. Ready? Let's just go ahead and listen, and then be looking down here in the inspector window. On the meters here, you're gonna be seeing the peak level over here, and we'll take a look. Even in the hardest days, even through the darkest haze, we'll be here together. We'll hold one another, we'll fight for each other. We won't walk away, even through the restless nights, even through the longest of fights. Our love won't fall. Okay, so I think you get the idea. And even when you can hear me talking now, like my voice sounds a little quieter compared to that, of course. That's because this was peaking at like 0 dB. Not good. That's not great. When you start talking about compressing this, when you start actually processing this is not going to sound good, okay? Let's listen to Too Soft. Now you can even just see in the waveform here, yeah. So let's give this a shot here. And so again, no compression, no EQ, nothing on it, faders at 0. Let's listen. Even through the hardest days, even through the darkest haze, we'll be here together. We'll hold on. So you get the idea. Even if we start boosting the gain, what's going to happen is any sort of noise that could be happening in the room, any of that stuff, you're also going to be boosting that. And so that is not good. It's too soft. So let's listen to the example here of perfect. You can see even here, the waveform looks good. It's kind of in the middle between the two of these. And let's check this out. Even in the hardest days, even through the darkest days, we'll be here together. We'll hold one another. We'll fight for each other. We won't walk away, even through the restless nights, even through the longest of fights. So you get the idea. And of course, this is like, I did one take for all these, so it's not like I practiced or anything. So no, it doesn't sound fantastic. It doesn't sound great. It's not like, I literally was sitting here at my desk doing this. So you can get the idea here. Now what I'm gonna do is actually go ahead and just really quickly run some processing on this one, the perfect take, so you can see how good this can sound once we start applying compression, EQ, and doing all that other fun stuff, delay and reverb. So I'm basically just gonna quickly run through processing on this, just with the piano, just so you can see what this would sound like. Because listen to this again. Even in the hardest days. Doesn't sound like great, right? I mean, like, it's good though. I mean, like, obviously the take's not good, but the quality of the audio is good. This is something that we can absolutely work with. Everything, all the checks are, all of the boxes have been checked as far as what we want out of a take. So I'm gonna go ahead and process this. Give me a second here. Okay, so this is just like 5 minutes worth of just throwing some stuff in here, have some compression, EQ, de-esser, another compressor, have a little bit of reverb and delay. Even in the hardest days, even through the darkest days, we'll be here together. We'll hold one another. We'll fight for each other. We won't walk away. So again, that compared to nothing on it. Even in the hardest days. And then after. Even in the hardest days, even through the darkest days, we'll be. So there you go. And number 2, the second mistake is blaming mixing on what is actually a sound selection problem. The overwhelming majority of people who are producing in a home studio think that their biggest problem is mixing. That is the number one reason their stuff does not sound great. And while there is some definite truth in the fact that mixing makes things sound really great and can make things sound fantastic and everything if you're mixing properly, the truth of the matter is that your production should sound good before you are even at the stage of mixing. Producing and mixing are actually two different parts of the process. Producing is when you're actually building the arrangement, when you're actually tracking things in, you're actually developing the whole project. The mixing process is, gain staging and EQ, compression, all that fun stuff where you can start adding the effects. And, for some of us, we're kind of mixing as we do it. But then even for me, when I get to the end, a lot of times I take everything off and I start from scratch and I actually mix it 100% from the beginning. But the problem is that so many people blame mixing on what are really not mixing issues in the first place. A lot of it comes down simply to sound selection. So if you're doing anything with like MIDI, for example, making sure that you're using sounds that actually fit the session, that fit the project. So often people end up choosing these sounds that sound really artificial or just don't fit. And that, more than anything, is simply a sound selection problem. I know this is really difficult to demonstrate, so we're not going to really jump into the DAW, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to demonstrate specifically what I mean. Hopefully you can just understand what I'm talking about. Basically things like the piano doesn't sound good, I should probably EQ it differently or compress it differently, when really it's, well, why don't you just start with a really good piano sound? Or why don't you start with a really great sounding guitar? Start with a really great sounding, you fill in the blank. The problem is that so often people think it's a mixing problem when really this is just straight up a production problem. Your music should sound good before you even get to the mixing process. So often the music sounds like garbage, and then you just kind of expect the mix to just fix everything. And it can sound garbage for a lot of different reasons, but I've seen so often a lot of it comes down simply to sound selection. So the truth of the matter is you can definitely get away with using presets and stock instruments and things like that. I made an entire video where I produced an entire song using only stock plugins and stock instruments in Logic. You can check out the video in the corner here. So it's definitely possible. However, it is, in my opinion, worth it to invest in sample libraries and invest in sounds. That's for me where I've invested the majority of my money, is to have as many sounds available as possible, because I'm a very firm believer in my music sounding the way it does, because I'm very good at sound selection. Let's talk about number 3. Number 3 is not getting it right at the source. This is sort of similar to the first one, but I want to dive into a little bit more deeper detail than the first mistake, which is recording things too hot or too quiet. By getting it right at the source, I'm talking a lot about performance primarily. I'm talking about the room you're in, making sure that you're in a space that is conducive for recording, making sure that when you are performing, the actual performance itself is just fantastic. There's no question that if the performance is not good, it's not going to translate into a really great track. You need to understand that so much of the decision-making process that goes into what a great sounding song is going to be, it's a lot of very small decisions, a lot of very small things that add up into the very big things. So when it comes to like performance, for example, you have to be extremely rigorous in terms of making sure that performance is just totally spot on. So when it comes to vocal performance, of course, you need to edit your vocals. You're probably going to have to do pitch correction, even if it is a killer take. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But there's no question that the performance just has to be a spot on performance in order for this to be a great sounding track. And so don't think that you can just get away with, well, I'll edit that and I'll tune that and I'll do XYZ instead, or I can make that work, or I'll fix it in post. Like, all of that stuff is just not good. If your stuff doesn't sound good right away at the source, and by at the source, I'm just talking about when you are recording it, when you are getting it in, you want things to sound good as you are doing it. It is never a good thing for you to say, I'll fix it later. That's usually not something that's great. Now, there are definitely things that you're going to fix later. Of course there are, but work to get things sounding as great and as amazing at the very beginning as possible. So getting the levels right, we already talked about in the very first example here. Getting a really solid performance, making sure that you're recording in a room that is conducive for recording. It's not a super echoey room, or it's not in an environment that just sounds terrible. I'll leave that there. I think you get the idea. If you need more clarification on it, just leave me a comment. We'll talk about it. Oh, and if you'd like to talk with me beyond just the comment section down below, feel free to follow me on Instagram, send me a DM. Love to say, hey, how's it going? Now we're moving on to mistake number 4, and that is over-arranging the mids. So what I'm talking about is making arrangements that are simply just too cluttered. Again, I think this is where so many people say, my mixing isn't as good as it should be, when it's really, no, actually your arranging needs work. Because if you're thinking that you can just EQ the snot out of everything and you can, I'll make this all kind of work and I've got all these layers and all this stuff happening and I'll fix it in the mix. That's not good. Listen to basically all of the music that is the most successful today, and you're going to find that typically the arrangements are not just like tons and tons of things happening, especially if you're working in a genre that has vocals. You want your vocal to have space for that vocal to exist in the mid-range, and getting in that, kind of 400 to 1000 hertz is really where the vocal is going to be the most kind of existent. I don't know why I said that. Okay, you get the idea. The main thing is that you should not be overdoing it. And I think there's a difference between layering to get a really good sound and then layering just for the sake of layering. So be really careful that when you're making decisions on the production side, those decisions are intentional. You're doing them on purpose. You're not just doing it because you saw some person's DAW where they had 100 tracks, so now you feel you need to do stuff with 100 tracks. And I've had stuff in my sessions here that you've probably seen in other videos if you watch my channel, where I have a lot of stuff going on, but all of that stuff is very intentional, and all 100 of those tracks are not happening at the same time. I'm making sure that each individual track, each individual part has a very specific purpose. So just to give you an idea, say that you've got this synth part that's doing like a da 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 da. It's like kind of this, cool little melodic line. It's giving us some information regarding what the chords are that we're using. And say that's got a really soft attack, and it's got a really cool sound though. But I want that sound to be a little more unique. So then let's say I decide to use like maybe a hammered dulcimer, which has a little more of a percussive attack, but then it's got that really amazing kind of string sound that's going to complement that. I'm going to fuse those together. But the idea is not to have like two completely unique sounds that kind of don't work together. The idea is I want my listener to almost think that that's actually all the same sound. That's the idea of layering. So when we're talking about arranging, typically you don't need as much as you might think you need. So if you have some rhythm guitar, your bass guitar, maybe a piano, maybe some other keys and stuff, that's usually plenty. That's plenty to have. In fact, you don't even necessarily want to have all of that happening at the same time, except for in the really big moments. And you just need to be really careful that you're not overdoing it. You're not adding too many counterparts. You're not adding too many counter melodies. You're not doing too much stuff that really just gets in the way. And this is really, really pertinent if we're talking about vocal music. You want to have room and space for that vocal to exist, especially if you're wanting to have a relatively bigger kind of vocal production. So that's the fourth one, is overdoing it in the mids, specifically just arrangement wise, and just adding stuff for the sake of adding stuff. The biggest thing that I think as a composer, as an arranger, and as a producer, which I kind of see all three of those things being kind of like very well interlocked, is the idea of intentionality. This is something that I talk about a lot with the artists that I work with too, on the songwriting side as well, is being very intentional. What the things are that you're doing, you have to think through, why am I doing this? What is the purpose? What is it accomplishing? And if it's not accomplishing that, don't do it. And number 5, here we go. About to probably make some enemies. Not editing your sessions meticulously. I listen to a lot of music done in home studios, self-producing artists that are looking to work with me and my artist development company, for example, sending me music, and you can tell that it's self-produced. This is one of the biggest tells in my mind that I can tell that this was self-produced and not done by a professional producer. Not editing. And this goes a lot deeper than just like, oh yeah, just kind of removing little stuff and adding fades. Like, that's important. You need to do that. So for example, but if you have something like a guitar part and then there's like maybe 2 beats or something where the guitar isn't playing, and then it comes back in dun 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 bum ba dum bum 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 ba dum bum bum. During that silent part, you gotta cut that out. You gotta add fades. And if you're not adding the fades, you're gonna get popping and clicking noises, little artifacts and stuff that the moment you start compressing and adding EQ and all of the different effects, and especially like reverb and stuff, it's gonna be noticed. It might not seem like a big deal, but anyone who has experience and expertise in this is going to be able to tell. That is not even the worst of it. The worst of it is I get so many tracks sent to me that are clearly not edited rhythmically. Rhythmic editing has to be done. Now, first and foremost, you can do whatever you want. Like you can take this advice or you can ignore this advice. Totally up to you. So if you're one of those people that's thinking that's cheating, why don't you just get it right at the performance and all that stuff? First and foremost, I recall I said in one of these that you should get things right at the source, correct? I think I said that. Yes, get things right at the source. It's super, super important, but there is no one that plays perfectly in time. There is no one that sings perfectly in pitch. And so when it comes to editing, it is not about fixing a bad performance. It's about taking a good or a great performance and really making it stand out. I can tell you that when I worked at a studio under a producer, this was the very first thing he had me doing, was editing drums. And guess what? It's super time consuming. It is not fun stuff. It's actually really kind of aggravating work to do, but it is 100% essential. And if you're not doing it, your music will forever sound like it was done by an amateur. And I'm not trying to just be really mean and rude or any of that stuff. I'm just saying this as a fact. If you listen to anything on the radio, anything on Spotify, Apple Music, or any sort of distribution that really sounds good, they are all edited. Editing is, in my opinion, where things really start to gel together. Even a really great performance by a drummer or a guitarist, bass, whatever, the moment you start editing stuff, and by editing, I'm talking about using the scissor tool, using crossfades, lining everything up to the grid. I do have an entire course on this, by the way. You can buy it down in the link below. That's what I'm talking about, is by fixing any sort of errors tempo-wise with the rhythm. This also has to do with editing vocals in terms of pitch, okay? You need to edit pitch. I'm not talking about auto-tune. I think a lot of people, when they hear auto-tune, many people have this very visceral reaction like, oh my gosh, like auto-tune is the worst thing ever. While I don't like auto-tune, I don't. I like flex pitch though, where I can manipulate the tuning of individual notes. It does sound natural if you know how to do it. It does sound natural if you're good at it. If you're not good at it, then yeah, it's going to sound like you just slapped a bunch of auto tune on it. It's going to sound like crap. By the way, I have an entire video on flex pitch as well. That's right there. Okay, so the main thing here is that if you are not editing your tracks, it's not going to sound in the pocket. It's not going to be super locked in. To the extent at which you edit, that's up to you. Like, you don't have to edit every single little thing down to the 16th note 100% perfect. Though, if you're in any sort of mainstream genre, you're probably going to want to do that. I mean, I do that in basically everything I'm doing too. So make sure that when you're getting the takes down, you're doing it to a metronome. The performance is really solid, and then take the time to edit. And I'm just going to say this for those of you guys who are Logic users, because my channel, I talk a lot about Logic. Flex time sucks. I'll probably have to make an entire video on that. I do not use flex time except for sometimes on bass guitars and very, very simple stuff. There's so many bad artifacts and stuff that you get with it. It's super annoying. I hate it. I don't like it. Is it more time consuming to do it by hand with the scissors? Yes, of course it is. But I also really would like my stuff to sound like it was actually produced in a professional studio, not in a bedroom. So if that's you, I would highly recommend learning how to do it. My course that I have down in the link below has like a couple hours worth of video where I go through an entire session. I also give you example tracks that you can pull the whole thing into your DAW and actually practice editing that stuff yourself as well. If you're interested, no pressure. If you're not interested, don't buy it. I don't care. So if you like this video, if any of these parts resonate with you, if you haven't already, smash the like button and also subscribe to the channel. Make sure you click the bell for notifications. And let me know in the comments what you think. I'd be very curious. I'm super curious to see if you agree, disagree, and if you disagree, well, I don't really care. Whatever. No, I'm just kidding. And if you have any suggestions for videos I should do here down the road in the future, let me know. I'd love to hear what you're interested in, what you'd like to see from my channel as we move forward, because I do want to be putting out a lot more content. And thank you for everyone who has subscribed and become part of the channel family. So have fun, guys. Continue making music at home. Oh, boom, there's the tag. Yeah. See you in the next video. Boom.